Okay, it's 4 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the Special Public Safety Committee meeting. Roll call, all committee members are present. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 24th day of July, 2026. Notice was sent to the Washington County Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Please join me in a moment of silent prayer and a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Our first item of business is discussion and presentation on the Washington countywide EMS system. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, whether you're here in the room or watching from home. This meeting is a long time coming and been a couple years in the making. There's been a lot of discussion on this very important issue. A lot of questions have been raised. A lot of good, healthy discussions have been had from people from every corner of the county. I've had the opportunity to be involved in these talks surrounding this proposal for quite some time now, and those talks have come a long way for us for this to be introduced today. I would also like to welcome members of the county board who are not on this committee but chose to attend. We appreciate you being here today. This meeting serves as an early discussion of the current EMS proposal, going over provisions and details from a high level. With that being said, keep in mind that there may still be some tweaks to this plan, as the plan is not finalized yet. Also, please note that there will be more opportunities to go through the details of this plan in the months ahead. So again, the purpose of today's meeting is for the Public Safety Committee to gather the information and hear the initial proposal for the countywide EMS system. It is not intended for us to work out the final details at today's meeting. For today's meeting, the committee has invited the county executive, chief public safety officer, and several members of the EMS work group that have helped develop the proposal to implement a countywide EMS system to offer their testimony on this program. These guests are here to advise the committee on why a countywide system is being explored, share the initial proposal details, and answer questions from the committee members. Tonight's meeting is not a public hearing, so no vote will be taken on this proposal. It's strictly for the introduction of the countywide EMS system partnership opportunity. This means members of the public are welcome to attend, but will not have an opportunity to address the committee at this time. Instead, we encourage members of the public listening to listen and learn, just as we are here to listen and learn. No final decision will be made for several months. We also encourage interested members of the public to reach out to their county board supervisors with their input and attend the county executive town hall meetings scheduled in the weeks ahead. Those sessions are very interactive. It gives you an opportunity to get your questions answered directly. At this time, we will proceed with the presentation by our county executive and the work group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members, county board supervisors, chiefs, chief elected officials, and members of the public for being here and being part of this discussion. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that introduction. I will reiterate what he said, that this is a current proposal. It's the product of years and especially the last 6 or 7 months of work by many of the people you're going to hear from today. Our ask of you today is not to have every answer or to try to be prepared to make any decisions, but instead to absorb the information and prepare for public policy decision making in the next several months. If this meeting is anything like the last few that I've experienced as we've discussed shared services and this issue at hand, it's going to be one where we all learn a lot, maybe even about ourselves. Let me take you backwards a little bit and give you a brief history before I turn it over to our Chief Public Safety Officer to give you the particulars of the proposal. You may or may not remember that back in 2019, the Fire Chiefs Association here in Washington County approached me and about sharing county sales tax. They at the time were starting to communicate to us already that there were on the horizon serious financial challenges that they were facing. And in particular, they could not take on the cost as they had about a decade earlier of all of the new equipment related to our radio system upgrade. To them, it would have cost tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. You remember that past county boards have approved the new radio system to be fully funded, including many times you've approved a separate radio fund to pay for brand new radios that these departments need. Fast forward a few months and into the year 2020 and beyond, you go into 2023 and you'll remember there was multiple times where municipalities were asking for sales tax. I can tell you we had multiple meetings. That first fire chiefs meeting was a little loud. Several of the meetings with local elected officials when talking about sharing sales tax was probably louder yet. And after the referendum that 17 of our municipalities placed on the agenda asking for shared sales tax, we had our first ever chief elected official meeting. And that was probably the loudest of them all. There are several members of that body who are sitting here today who I think can attest it was quite uncomfortable. There's maybe some things that we learned about one another since then that I think have been helpful to get us to this point. But I anticipate this conversation, both for you as a committee, for the county board in the next several months, and for this community, will have similar moments in time. So I ask you, as we go through this process, to keep an open mind, to help focus on the issue at hand, and more importantly, the solution that needs to come forth. I will challenge you to remind you that in the last 2 cycles, in strategic priorities, the county board has placed safe and secure community and specifically solving the fire and EMS issue at the top of your list. Even further, you've not just put it on a goal sheet, you funded it to the tune of $1 million a year for the last 3 years with one-time revenue sources, knowing that in the future there was going to be some sort of need long-term. Even going a step beyond that, we funded a study of the entirety of the fire and EMS system here in Washington County to find ways where we can create efficiencies and work better together. That work culminated at near the end of last year. As was indicated by Dave Sager in your committee report, a presentation was given on that study itself. I won't go into the details of it, but it really set the tone for the work that you're going to hear about today. Earlier this year, about in the month of January, it might have been the month of December, the chief elected officials, the fire chiefs, and the administrators met with county leadership and decided there was going to be a work group created to formulate what eventually would become the proposal that you're going to hear about today. That work group consisted of 3 chief elected officials, 3 fire chiefs, 3 administrators, and county leadership. As uncomfortable as that first series of meetings was over the previous 4 years, there was several times where Les Norton and I had some friendly exchanges, I can call them now. There were several times where Chief Kaler and I had some friendly exchanges, I can call them friendly now. But everybody, regardless of the banter and the back and forth and the frustration, and I think at least 3 or 4 times looking at one another and saying, I think this is over. We made it through because the issue that we are facing is one that is nearing a crisis. This is not an issue that is exclusive to Washington County. I know we all feel privilege and special to live here in Washington County, but with regard to this particular public policy matter, you're seeing it all over the state of Wisconsin. There was an article today in the Wisconsin State Journal from the Sun Prairie Fire Chief articulating almost the exact same crisis that we're facing in his community and in communities across Dane County. There was an article today about a town just outside of Lake Mills in Jefferson County facing very much the same issue that we're talking about today. And there's been articles the last several years, including departments entirely shutting down in this state and counties completely, truly taking over. What we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years is community after community after community wrestling with the public policy issue that we're asking you to wrestle with now. Some have gone to referendum, some have closed their doors, some have consolidated by choice or otherwise, but everybody is searching for solutions. I think the solution that you're going to hear about today in its current proposal state, and that is exactly what it is, it's just a proposal, is a great starting point. There are a lot of details that you're going to hear about today that are probably different than what you've heard in the last several days. If you've been catching glibs and glabs from the last several meetings between the fire chiefs, the chief electeds and the county, a lot of things have changed. There's probably been a dozen iterations of different proposals that to get to the point where we could present to you tonight. Before we dive into the proposal, I want to end this way. This issue is acute. It's not a crisis that we're waiting to see. It's one we're living in the midst of. When we started this discussion years ago, we talked about the possibility of departments in this county being forced to do something drastically different than they've done for 50 or 100 years. In the time that we've been talking, we've had a volunteer fire company completely dissolve and become municipal. We've had another department talk about privatizing and instead partnering with another local community. And there are several more on the horizon. We're not waiting to see what's going to happen. It's happening in front of us. You have the opportunity, the county has the opportunity to do something that no one else is doing, and that is step in and actually lead. I want to thank our chief elected officials for the challenging but productive discussions, our fire chiefs for not only the meetings and discussions with elected officials, but also amongst themselves, really focusing in on the issue at hand. This is a challenge for every one of the municipalities in this county, all 20 of them. But I will tell you, it's particularly a challenge for our towns. One thing that is different between our towns versus our cities and villages, who I'm sure would want to jump up to the microphone and say, no, we've got a challenge too. But towns have a unique double-edged sword they're facing. On the one hand, they have a statutory mandate, unlike cities and villages, that they must provide EMS service. And on the other side of the sword, they have no additional funding revenue. Their only options for additional revenue are to go to referendum and to borrow money. And that's it. And we're seeing both of those things play out. You have an opportunity and a tool that nobody else has. And I think what we've learned as we've gone through this last 7 months, as painful as it sometimes is that tool is something that really needs to be deliberated by this body and considered by this whole county. I thank you again for the opportunity to work with this committee to present to you today. And the timeline for the next several months is very important for you to actually do the work of the legislative body of deliberating. There is nothing written in stone. There is no concrete, this is how it must be. You all know we're already in the business to the tune of $1 million. The proposal you're going to hear about today, as you've read about, is 3.5. Frankly, I anticipate it'll be somewhere in between there. It is incumbent upon you to figure out what the right number is so that when somebody calls 911, they can have a high degree of certainty there will be a response. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to our Chief Public Safety Officer.
Do we have any questions for our county executive at this point?
Yeah, I have one question. If you knew this years ago, why didn't we budget it for this and plan for it a little money wise, put money away?
You did. You've budgeted and spent in the last 3 years, $3 million, $1 million each year, knowing it was coming. And I can show you the video from the November county board meeting, when I actually told you all we needed to cut the levy last year, which we did, the year we're currently in, so that we could anticipate this coming increase. So we have been planning not just for 1 year, but for the last 4 years.
Any other questions from the committee? Go ahead, Mr. Sager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Public Safety Committee members. I am excited about this opportunity to be before you today. It's been a long time coming. I appreciate the executive's words. His vision throughout the process is extraordinary. And the chief electeds, the fire chiefs, and the administrators outside of this proposal has been an enormous success. All the meetings we've had, the collaboration, the communications, the relationships that have been built. Friendships are unique, but they're even more special when they're friends that are admired. And each and every single one of them, I admire them all for coming together to try and solve this problem. And that's what we have before us today. We have a problem. Ashley, could I get the screen? Thank you. The problem we have before us is just that. Unique to this situation is we're providing a solution. That's before you today. Do I have it plugged in correctly, Ashley? I'm not sure.
This is not your screen?
Can I do this one?
I try that one. Is that your laptop though?
Yes.
That's not the screen from the laptop.
Is this his laptop though? Who- I don't know. So your screen, do you usually use dual screen?
Hang on one second. Might be.
Mike,
It
I
is.
emailed it to you.
It is.
I emailed it to you. Can I use your computer?
There you go.
Got it. Sweet. One in technology. Aaron reminded me I was 5 out of 300. Now I'm back to 1 out of 300. Ugh. More work to do. So we have today for you a PowerPoint presentation similar to what we provided to you in May and then the county board in June. This is the countywide fire and EMS current proposal. It does have 5 objectives, and I just want to repeat them to you: to mitigate long-term property tax burden for Washington County taxpayers, to proliferate the volunteer and paid-on-call fire and EMS services, to preserve satisfactory level of EMS service for all of Washington County citizens, relieve municipal fiscal pressures, and lastly, provide fiscal sustainable improvements for fire and EMS departments, ... while maintaining local control for all our municipalities within this proposal. We have a promise to the residents that they depend on, that when they do call 911, help must be available. The challenge is ensuring they have the staffing, resources, and coordination needed to continue delivering that service as demand grows. Our fire and EMS professionals provide excellent service, superior service, in fact. The problem is a fragmentized system that makes it increasingly difficult for them to deliver that service efficiently and sustainably. The challenges that we face are, we have more calls with the same limited resources. The county's population is growing and aging. Call volumes continue to increase. Available volunteers are shrinking. Emergency vehicles routinely respond beyond their home communities, and independently operated providers limits opportunities to share costs, personnel, and resources. The volunteer base, and you guys have seen these slides before, generously provided by Chief West, who's exceptional in technology. But I will have you look at the front end of that graph has the age of our volunteers and years of services. It's not quite as populated as we traject forward to our median age of 40 and beyond, is more populated with longer years of service. So we're not getting that younger generation incorporated into the volunteer fire service, and quite frankly, the volunteerism across the board, be it churches, Rotaries, but also including the fire service. The volunteers we have beyond 40, once you're in it for life. We have some volunteers that are well into their 70s, God bless them, and it's appreciated. We can see that age distribution in a different mechanism. Again, the bar graph shows that we have approximately 160 volunteers in the age range of 45 and beyond. Our population, again, is about 136,000 residents. Nearly 1 in 5 residents is 65 or older. An aging population typically requires emergency medical services more frequently. And slips, trips, and falls are already the leading EMS call type, totaling 3135 calls in the county's presentation data. Slips, trips, and falls are uniquely the highest call volume in any community. Our population change since 1970 has grown to 114% than what it was in 1970. The age group from 2010 to 2020, obviously it's going to increase exponentially going forward. It's, as it stated earlier, 20% of our population is 65 and above. So that will continue to increase. And given the fact that our aging population wants to stay in their home longer and not go to the assisted living centers or nursing homes, they're staying in home longer, which increases that call type for slips, trips, and falls, because as we age, things don't work as they once did. This is another graph that depicts our female and male population ages. Our female are more populated the older they get versus men. Us fellas have to pick up the slack a little bit because we'd like to live a little bit longer too. The demand for service is rising. So in this chart that you've seen before, and I'll put some numbers to it. In 2018, and this is all data that comes from the state of Wisconsin, our EMS incidents in Washington County was 11,295. In 7 years, that's a 50% increase to 16,847. There's a dip in 2023 and 25, but the positive upward trend in EMS incidents within the county continues. The cost of services. So this line graph put together by the integrator, Aaron Dahl, identifies that yellow line as the net new construction that's available to our municipalities. That's what they can get. That blue line is the self-reported 5 and 10-year projections that were given to us by the fire chiefs of each municipality. And that green line is what is before you for consideration and deliberation. And our hope is to bring forward smart goals and strategic priorities within this proposal downrange so that we can potentially bend that green line down. What is being proposed? One stronger emergency response network. A county-supported system would preserve local fire and EMS providers, coordinate available personnel, ambulances, and fire apparatus. It does share costs and resources where practical, supports countywide protocols and medical direction, use priority-based dispatching, send the closest appropriate available help. What the residents will receive in 3 different categories is reliable emergency response. They already have that. We want to preserve and proliferate that with the qualified help remains available when residents call 911. Stronger local providers and the departments receive sustainable support for staffing, equipment, and service. More dependable coverage. The system can locate and dispatch available resources more effectively. Better use of existing resources, communities coordinate instead of duplicating every capability. Priority-based dispatching resources are matched to the urgency and needs of each call. Local service and accountability, local providers remain central to emergency response. The cost of doing nothing, because that's also a decision, that's also a plan. The status quo of doing nothing will result in more local borrowing, repeated municipal referenda, reduced or inconsistent service, emergency action after part of the system begins to fail. So this is the proposal, the current proposal. So for a home valued at $400,000, the average cost is $52 a year, or 12 cents per $1,000, $425 a month. This investment supports one of local government's most fundamental responsibilities and ensures help arise during a fire, medical, emergency, or other threat to public safety. Inside that proposal as well, and I want to reiterate that what the executive has said is you're considering a $3.5 million proposal presently right now, 12 cents per thousand, costing the average homeowner $52 per month. Inside that though, it also has $500,000 allocated to our volunteer and paid on call departments. And it also calls for a 10% $300,000 county administration fee. That's capped at $300,000. So all those factors that I just stated equals the 3.5. It's not $500,000 and $300,000 on top of the 3.5. Everything is incorporated into that formula. So I can answer questions on that as well. So protecting reliable emergency service. When a resident calls 911, the system must be ready. This proposal would strengthen local providers, coordinate countywide resources, and create a sustainable foundation for fire and EMS service as Washington County grows. And I'm happy to entertain any questions.
So committee members have a question for Dave? Go ahead, Ms.
My question is, you said $52 per month?
No, that's a year. It's
Okay.
$4.25 a month.
So is this, okay, that's 400,000 for a 400,000 household.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I have another question because I didn't see that number on here. I saw some other numbers. And I gotta find that now.
Okay,
And I thought it was a little more than that. That's why I was confused at, because you had so many different numbers in here.
in the packet?
Yes.
Okay,
And so I was trying to understand, oh, like, okay, let's say the town of Erin or the village of Germantown has to pay more than some other towns like West Bend or
so
Milford?
presently under the current proposal, that would be all levy dollars. It's being levied the only way the county can do it based on equalized value. It's being redistributed by equalized value. So whatever is being taxed goes right back to the municipalities outside of that $500,000 for the volunteer and paid on call services and the $300,000 for county administration fee capped.
So the other question I have is the percentage that of that money that we are supposed to, have the taxpayers pay for, that 3.5 million, all of that is going into the community.
With the exception of that $800,000, yes.
If you go to your committee report, Supervisor Predmore, on page 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a section called fiscal effect. And I can just walk you through, it's spelled out there, so I'll walk you through how those numbers.
Right on WashingtonCounty.gov, is that?
Are we able to pull the packet up on the screen? Is that
okay.
possible?
Our page numbers might not match yours
Oh,
because
I see.
she's on the
Oh,
website.
okay, sure.
Okay.
So there's a section called fiscal effect. Are you to that section?
Yes,
So if you read these bullets, Dave was walking you through the impact to the taxpayer, which we put first. That's bullet 1 and bullet 2. Bullet 3 starts to, I think, answer the question you're asking. So the $3.5 million levy it's a property tax levy. No matter how the county pays for it, it's taxpayers paying, right? In this
Mhm.
particular case, what makes this unique is the state of Wisconsin and the legislature. Now, this is dating back well over a decade, they've authorized an exception in property taxes. You're familiar with net new construction, which caps the amount we can collect, right? The increase it per year. An EMS levy, they've left as an exception to be able to pay for EMS services only. So these dollars are separate property tax levy, similar to our road and bridge aid levy. But in this case, every municipality is eligible for it. So it's a $3.5 million property tax. Then in the next bullet, number 4, this is out of that 3.5 million, 2.025 under this proposal goes dollar for dollar from the communities as you described it, Supervisor, and it goes right back to the community. For every dollar that comes in, the dollar goes back, whether it's Germantown or Aaron or Farmington, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so I have, the other question is the 300,000 offset for administrative expenses. I just feel like our government's gonna get really fat with this, but because it's gonna be a yearly thing?
Yes. So why don't I touch on the next bullet and then get to your $300,000 question? Because the next bullet, the 675,000, that goes to the 13 departments. And 7 of our departments are municipal, but 6 of the 13 are private companies. So under this proposal, you as the Public Safety Committee would have the authority over executing those grant dollars on an annual basis. You'll write the rules. Obviously, the Chief Public Safety Officer will recommend some things working with the fire chiefs, but then you'll approve or disapprove every year those dollars going out. Then the next bullet to your point about the 300,000, that money, you remember when we created the grant program, the $1 million a year,
Mhm.
we also created the Chief Public Safety Officer program, the position. And when we created it, the whole plan all along was we're going to work on this project. It's going to be the number one priority of the new position. It is, in fact, has been. This now gives it a permanent funding source aside from the operational levy. Now, that's not to say you have to do it that way. You could keep using the operational levy. But if you continue to use the operational levy, those dollars can't go to something else. For example, the detective position that your committee has talked about in recent months. So either is possible. You'll notice that it's less than 10% of the total here, but it is part of what was proposed for your consideration. And then I just want to touch on that last bullet as long as we're on a roll.
Yes, go ahead.
That last bullet, I would argue, is really kind of where the starting point for this whole conversation was. And what I mean by that is what we've seen is these, especially our volunteer and paid on call departments, highly stressed out for all of the reasons you saw in the presentation earlier. We've seen declining volunteerism. For example, when I left the Village of Ridgefield in 2014, there was about 75 volunteers. Before they went to referendum and became municipal, they were down to the low 20s. That's pretty hyperbolic, but it's happening everywhere in different size and scope. Those dollars are specifically intended to be an incentive to incentivize more volunteers to stay in the service and get into the service. More volunteers means less reliance on full-time departments and less stress on our current full-time paramedics and firefighters.
Okay, I had another question and that's fine. And I'm sure it'll pop up again and.
Plenty of time to answer them too.
No, I'm sorry, but.
No, it's good.
We got a list of them.
Are you all set?
Yeah.
Okay, Supervisor Bosser.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think we all agree that there's a need. The challenge is real. I recall being at a CSC meeting maybe 5 to 6 years ago where these exact challenges were discussed with several firefighters from different local firefighting units. We all agree as well that the work the fire chiefs and elected leaders are doing right now to reduce redundancies, to find efficiencies, to improve the cooperation between their different departments and municipalities, that's all great as well. And I also appreciate the county executive setting up these listening sessions. I think that's going to be very important to have the community be able to ask questions and hear the same stuff that we're hearing in this meeting. So I appreciate that that's happening. Obviously, our committee, we need to do our jobs. We need to look very closely at the financial piece. and see how this impacts our countywide taxpayers. I have a lot of questions that I think I'm gonna defer today and maybe talk to Aaron Dahl one-on-one outside this meeting to get some more details, because I want to make sure that in these meetings, I'm speaking on right details, and I'm not sure I quite have them. This does propose a 12% or a 12 cents to the mill rate tax increase. I do want to ask, how does that compare to what we're projecting for net new construction for next year? Do we have a projection yet on that?
In terms of projecting net new construction, we typically assume that would result in about $600,000 of new levy. I didn't I didn't calculate what that would mean to the rate. But you know, if you could infer, you know, what adding 3.5 million does at 12% versus adding 600,000
Yeah.
at, you
So
know,
we're likely talking 2 or 3 cents,
or
maybe.
something like that.
Construction. Yeah, okay. Couple things I do wanna address here. First thing is this gonna be a separate line item on the tax bill, or will this be rolled into the county tax levy? Or is that to be determined?
I think it's one. I believe it's similar to the road and bridge aid. When you levy the road and bridge aid, it's separate on our worksheet. So we have to do the math and send it to DOR, and then they send it back to the treasurer. But it doesn't show up separately on the tax bill. The library levy would be something similar.
Okay, the next question I had, I think you've kind of answered, but I just want to make absolutely sure. In managing this new levy that we're gonna put in, we're not creating any type of new tax board or tax authority group at all, right?
That's correct. So there have been,
It's gonna be a.
as I said, there's probably been 12 iterations of this discussion. At one time, we had talked about having contracts directly with the departments and intergovernmental agreements with the municipalities, which would have created somewhat of an informal group. Now, this current proposal would be contracts directly with the municipalities and grants to the departments. So the chief elected official group, I think, would become probably more important than it's ever been. However, they have no decision-making authority. This group and the county board would have all of the decision-making authority on the levy ultimately.
Okay, good. I think that's important. Traditionally, our county board has been very opposed to creating any new taxing authorities, be it a library board or a lake board. You know, we don't want any other groups of unelected people being able to create new taxes or raise taxes. So I think that's important. Let's see. I did get a question about whether we would be doing any type of referendum to approve this expenditure. Do you want to speak on that?
Sure. There's no referendum. As I mentioned with towns, and this is the case with some villages and cities, although they're not, they're a little bit different in that nature. Referendums and debt are basically the only instruments that municipalities have. We've had 2 municipalities in the last several years go to referendum, the village of Germantown and the village of Richfield. Both were adding full-time staff. Those were not for operational expenses. They were new personnel, similar to what we did with the anti-crime plan. The difference with what we're proposing today is this is for ongoing operating costs. So it is not the type of thing that I would recommend for a referendum. Specifically, the legislature gave it as an exemption, I think, for exactly that reason. And different counties have used it in different ways, none of which, as far as I understand, have any of them gone to referendum.
Okay, and I had somebody bring up the idea that this could be considered double taxation, since they pay
Great question.
municipal taxes and now county taxes that go to the same purpose.
Yes.
How would you speak to that?
That's a great question. So I would say first, it's not true. challenge that our municipalities have can be best described with just a couple of small examples. So I'll use the example of the town of Addison, and I'm going to use budget numbers. Don't hold me to exactly to the dime or the $10 bill, but the town of Addison has 2 contracts for fire and EMS service. And those collectively are to the tune of somewhere close to $300,000. I think a little bit more than that if I remember right. Town of Addison's total net new construction in 1 year is about $1,500, $2,000 on a good year if they built an extra shed. A 1% increase in those fire contracts is $3,000. It's exceeded that $1,500 by 100%. The reality is these fire and EMS departments are seeing substantially higher increases than that. Oftentimes, what the fire chiefs have said to us is they are seeing sometimes double-digit percentage increases. They're forced to go to municipalities and negotiate that number back down because they know the municipality has nowhere to get the money from. So the reality of the double tax question is there an existing tax that is historically paid for these services, fire and EMS? Yes, there historically has been. What we haven't historically seen is the numbers that you saw just a few minutes ago in this presentation, with a 50% increase in call volume in 7 years and a projected 100% increase in the next next 5 to 10 years. So what's really happening to the system is we have an aging population. With an aging population, you have more people on Medicaid. With an aging population, you have more calls for service, as was mentioned, slips, trips, and falls, many of which are not reimbursed at all or are minimally reimbursed. And it's creating a financial strain on those EMS departments like has never existed. So you've got rising costs, but a flatlined, as you saw in your graph, yellow tax levy. That gap, that difference is really what we are proposing that the county step in to address. Because as you know, with what we've done with priority-based budgeting, you're either forced to go find other revenue sources or cut. And after 20 years of levy limits, we're kind of seeing, especially our towns, and that's why I started with talking about our towns, you're seeing them in between a rock and a hard place. Now, I think what you'll find if you poll every single fire chief in every single municipality is there are some municipalities who have seen this issue in urgency and addressed it in the last 3 years and now have that operating issue going forward and will likely go to referendum again. You have others that are facing it for January 1st of 2027. You have others that are facing it in 28 and some others maybe 2030 or 2031. But I think everybody in those work groups have said, yeah, it's coming. It's a matter of time. The question for this body and everybody in this room is, when does the county step in? Or what solution then, if not the county, then what? And so there's no way, shape, or form it's a double tax. It's covering those ongoing costs that there is no other way, especially with Medicaid reimbursement the way it is, which, if I'm not mistaken, chiefs can correct me, but 50 some cents on the dollar, 50, 60 at the most. Is that fair? So it's similar to what we faced with Samaritan is at the bottom line. And legislature stepped in and helped with the Samaritan situation. They have not thus far with ambulance service. And if you ask legislators, that Medicaid problem is one of the biggest problems in the state budget. Biggest challenges, I should say. Does that answer your question, Supervisor?
Yeah, and that answers all the questions I had, other than the deep dive in the financials that I'll do with Aaron outside this
Very
week. So, thank you.
Supervisor Brightmore.
A couple of questions. First of all, I just want to say I do serve the people in my community. So as much as I respect everyone here, so I'm listening to them and they're asking me questions. And so that's why I'm coming up with some of these questions. One of them is, what happens if a town, or let's say Germantown, for instance, because I think they were questioning this, if they decide not to go with you on this? Or is this no matter what, every taxpayer in Washington County will be taxed when this passes through?
Well, I think it depends where their decision point is. If it's the resolution that many of these municipalities have passed and that particular resolution they decide they're not going to participate in, there is no effect. If the county board decides we're going to go ahead and levy this tax and we're going to redistribute it as we've shown, there will be a contract with every municipality. If they choose not to participate in that contract, I suppose they have the choice to reduce their levy by the same amount and receive those dollars, or they have a choice not to. That's their choice. In that case, if they choose not to accept it and continue to tax the people of the village of Germantown, then that would be a situation where you could create a double tax. But it is very avoidable if they choose to do that. If they choose to not to accept the dollars and they don't want to see any kind of increase, they would also have the option to lower their own property taxes.
Okay, and so, and then another, village, I don't know if it's a village or town, we're concerned with the clarity of this EMS system you have here, which I can understand that.
It's very complicated.
It is, and I
The
think they want
circumstances.
clarity.
Yes, it's very complicated. I said at the beginning, this has been and I think as I was walking down here, I was sharing with someone, you got to remember, the chief electeds and the fire chiefs and some of us sitting here have been working on this for 3 years, and especially in earnest in the last 7 months, sometimes a couple of times a month. The public and yourselves, this is the first time you're ever hearing it. So it's a lot of information, and I highly encourage you to entertain some of the other members of the work group and the fire chiefs who have been dealing with this firsthand, not just every other week, but they're dealing with it every single day, because there's a lot of questions that need answering to get to a solution that creates sustainability in our current EMS system.
Okay, and one last question for now. So this is just to be a continual thing every year.
Mhm.
So it isn't gonna be just for 8 years, because I thought I read 8 years.
That's actually a great question. So the current proposal as presented by the fire chiefs and the chief electeds was to do an initial 8-year term for a contract. So there's going to actually be several components of that contract, including some of those bullets we just went through with you, that are all things that this committee should really wrestle with. Is 8 years the right amount of time? Should it be 5? Should it be 3? Should it be 10? Similarly, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're already in for $1 million to some extent. And I believe there's an expectation, certainly from me, that continues to some variety. The cap now, the ceiling, if you will, is 3.5 million. Is it somewhere in between there? And then, this is something, of course, the chief electeds and the fire chiefs wouldn't even know to ask, but are there other revenue sources you want to use? Maybe you don't want to solely focus on a brand new property tax levy and EMS levy. Maybe you want to take a couple of different revenue sources and challenge Aaron and Dave and I to, drive that 12 cent per thousand number down to, please don't say 0, but 6, right? Something more manageable for a $400,000 house. I mean, if you're like me, and I know Supervisor, that you talk to constituents all the time and knock doors and do all those things just like I do, and affordability is the number one issue. But when I explain the issue to them about EMS in particular, there's an understanding and still yeah, but can you try to keep that number as low as possible? So I think those are all things that this committee and the county board really need to wrestle with. You may also notice in other documentation that at one time, you might have heard the rumor mill, there was a proposal that there's an annual 6% increase forever. And now that proposed increase is 2 to 4%, a floor of 2%, so they can count on it every year, and a ceiling of 4%. Are those the right numbers? Those are all things that this committee and ultimately the county board, I think, need to make the decision on
So is that
what's
ceiling-
workable.
let's just say we have 2 to 4%, that ceiling is, that's it for what? For 1 year, for 8
Yes.
years? Or
Yes, think of it similar to, the sheriff's department. Every year that budget goes up, right? What is an amount you're willing to say yes to? And remember, we operate on a biennial budget and they operate on an annual budget. So when we enter a contract, we're going to want to make sure it covers at least 2 years and likely 4. That we can say we don't have to come back for the next 2 years. We know it's a 4% increase. And I would anticipate there's going to be a year sometime in the next handful of years where they come in and say, hey, one of the departments is really struggling, or we got this equipment issue we have. Can we make it 5% next year? And then this body and ultimately the county board have to make that choice. Now, the last thing I'd like to say as regard to your question about 8 years, if I may, is if you look at the data on the aging population of Washington County, it makes about a camel hump. So we have an aging population from now until about 2040. And then the aging subsides. I don't have a nicer way of saying that. That's as nice as I can say that.
be happy to leave.
Yeah. But point being,
No
a
problem.
lot of the stress on the system will likely wane at that time. And then I think you're in a different circumstance. It's the same issue we have with housing. It's the same issue we have with shared ride taxi, which is almost exclusively elderly and disabled now. It was the same issue we talked about with Samaritan. It's the same issue everybody in the United States of America and the rest of the world is facing right now. So you have this window of about 15 to 20 years where there's going to be a huge surge. Our proposal in front of you today is we preserve a system that's still heavily volunteer and paid on call based. It heavily mitigates the cost. We can't eliminate the cost rise. It's coming. We can mitigate it. The alternative is a lot more municipal departments, a lot higher expense, a lot of internal fighting between departments for territory to try to make dollars. It's ugly. I would encourage you to go look at Lake Mills. The article that came out yesterday, they have towns and small departments fighting with each other. And those departments are going to break. Those financial models are so fragile. You're going to have a situation down there where calls aren't going to get answered. So it's not a forever thing. It shouldn't be a forever thing, but probably for most of the rest of our tenure with the county, it's a serious challenge with life consequences.
I got one comment to make, one point of clarification, because I believe Supervisor Bridemore was contacted about this, and maybe just a little clarification. So that there's been many, many versions of this out before the work group, and perhaps the most versions were of the distribution, how this gets distributed, not the amount necessarily, but who gets what piece of the pie. The version we have in front of us today makes everybody about as whole as you can be. So meaning, well, your community gets taxed, you get almost that back 100%, minus what we talked about before, administrative fee, retirement fee, things like that. But there's been some misunderstanding on there out in the community about that. So you kind of alluded to that in your first question, I think. But that's the version we have in front of us today.
Yeah, that's a big concern,
So it's not a situation where one community is supporting the little communities and things like that. This version is making you whole. I don't know if you had anything to add.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
I agree. And I would say maybe some of the loudest conversations revolved around per capita and formulas and equalized value and who gets what piece of the pie and how big. The consensus by the end, and I asked a question and Supervisor Newman was in that room and a lot of people behind me were in that room. Is there anybody who can't live with the proposal as is? And it took a lot of back and forth to get it to a point where your question was acknowledged by the group, like, yeah, we can't have a situation where somebody's paying $1 and getting a dime. And I think largely we've addressed that.
Supervisor Toma.
Thank you, Chairman. The question that I have is almost 100% comes back to the municipality. How is that gonna come back?
So 100% of the fourth bullet there, that 2.025, 100% comes back dollar for dollar to the municipality. It'll come back in the form of a check from our finance department based on a contract signed between the county and the municipality, which is similar to Supervisor Newman's or Chairman Newman, excuse me, his comments a moment ago. We've had a dozen iterations of that as well. So there is no hard and fast, this is the contract. We are trying to have this discussion with you today to help get to the point of being able to get a resolution, which will get us to the point of being able to have a contract. But the intent is Washington County contracts with all 20 municipalities. And then dollar for dollar, that 2.025 under this proposal, if you change it to 5 million, that's your choice. If you change it to 1.5 million, that's your choice. But dollar for dollar, it would go back under this proposal back to, in your case, the town of Trenton.
Do you have a follow-up question? Good.
No, I've had more, but they've been answered.
Okay, Supervisor Bossert.
So something just came up that I thought is interesting that I kind of want to camp out on a minute. You know, if you go back, way back in time to when we created the sales tax, I think there was a promise made at that time to the community that after 5 or 10 years, that would go away. And it never did. And every time it comes up for renewal, there's really no way to get rid of it at this point. But we keep hearing that broken promise mentioned that this was supposed to go away. Why are we renewing it? So as I was thinking about this tax increase, my first instinct was to say that we should effectively consider it a permanent increase. Even though we're making an agreement with the municipality for 8 years or some smaller time period, whatever it ends up being. But then I heard you talk about the population bubble. After we get to the other side of that bubble, do you think there's a chance that this would actually go away, or are we gonna be, should we view it like this is permanent?
Well, I'll be 60 years old or 65 years old at that point. So I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask, but I'm not sure there's a good person to ask in this world. I think one of the things you got to keep in mind is 15 years from now, if the call volume does what our projections from the study and from our chiefs show, you're talking in the next 20 years, the potentiality of a 200 and some % increase in calls. So we're talking serious numbers, which means those expenses could be pretty drastic, right? So to say even at that point, it'll be eliminated, I think that's a stretch. But my larger point was there will be a flattening out where those exponential rises in costs don't continue. It's just so far beyond any of our tenure that
Well,
it would
don't
be.
want to create problems or false promises for future.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree with you.
But effectively, we should view this really as if it's going to be a permanent.
Oh, yes, 100%. It'd be misleading to say it any other way.
Yeah. You also brought up the idea of finding creative ways to drive that number down. I encourage you to have that discussion and see what you can do there.
And before we leave today, I would ask the chairman if we could, at some point when you're prepared, circle back to exactly that, because I have some just thoughts off the top of my head on different things we can look at, but you go outside of a new levy, and you've all lived with our budget process for at least 2 cycles. If you're, for those of you who sitting at the table at least, you go outside of the EMS levy option, and there's probably some tough decisions that need to be made if we're going to account for that. Some will be easier, of course, but also some that could be quite challenging for us.
Okay, and then last question, are you working into this, anything that incentivizes the municipalities and fire departments to find cost savings and efficiencies.
You sure are. I say you are because we really want this committee particularly, certainly the county board to sign off on it, but this particular committee to help formulate it. And can you speak to the SMART goals? Not necessarily what they are exactly, but kind of how you're working on it to that
Right,
point.
so, when the consultant came to town and provided us with recommendations after their analysis, there were about 20 to 25 recommendations, and we've taken those, the chiefs have actually created a subcommittee to the subcommittee to try and address some of those recommendations, and they're working through that. Obviously, the process is much longer than we would like it to be sometimes, but we do have some SMART goals that I got a work group of fire chiefs together. We met in Jackson, the habitual host of all these work group meetings. And we've got, you know, a number of different things like operational accuracy and dispatch modernization. We touched base a little bit on that earlier about priority-based dispatching, getting some EMDs going on, emergency medical dispatching, getting some equipment in our vehicles that timestamps our runs and things of that nature that will help our fire departments that provide that EMS. A number, dedicated fire and EMS dispatcher. We're working on staffing up our dispatch. So some clinical quality, medical oversight and standardization, workforce development, staffing reliability and scheduling, financial sustainability and billing standardization. That was I don't want to call it like an aha moment in that work group that we had, but all of our entities are operating in silos. You know, so one entity says, oh, I use this company and I use this company, and some actually use the same billing agency. And even though they're using the same billing agency, they're getting charged different numbers. So it's like, hang on, we can do this better together rather than separately.
So there's, like Dave said, there's about 24
Yeah.
that the consultant recommended. What we would like to do is narrow those down to a more manageable number, if it's 6 or 9 or whatever you decide, but then come to you with not just a bunch of verbiage, but actual data points to say, you know, if you do this many of this widget, we consider that success. And I've said to the chiefs and the fire chiefs, and I've said to Chairman Schleif, I think we should actually have our contract replicate how we're doing on those things and put some teeth to, we want to see shared services and collaborations like Dave has just talked about. And if you're making progress, then we continue to help. The whole goal here is to preserve the system and do it, proliferate the system and do it in a way that is most efficient, effective, and economical for the taxpayer. So I think the goals, I should say, are something that this committee, especially in the coming meetings, needs to digest and mold. I felt like if we came to this meeting with that, I mean, we're already on information overload. I thought that would be just a bridge too far. So that's kind of the direction we're heading. Does that kind of answer what you were looking for?
So, all right.
We have the potential for all of this cannot be quantified, in my opinion. There's a new, I won't say new, within the past 10 years, community paramedicine, mobile integrated health. We all grew up knowing what 911 is, right? And I would say in the 70s and 80s, fire prevention and education was stood up. Okay, what you're supposed to do, how to avoid it, whole 9 yards. And over the course of that time frame to present day, fires in our communities have decreased dramatically due to that prevention and education. We can take that same model and implement it to EMS education and prevention with slips, trips, and falls and things of that nature, where we're going out to the community by request of the constituent. Hey, can you do just a once over in my house? And sure, we can come on in, look at it. Ooh, that rug right there, that's not a slip resistant rug. That is a potential for all the things like smoke detectors, but use that to generate that philosophy within the EMS division to try to drive down that run volume. So all things like bulk purchasing with all our departments, rather than everyone doing it separately, do it together. Our volunteer agencies, you know, when you onboard a brand new volunteer, that one volunteer just to onboard them first day, no education, no training, getting the equipment, about $10,000. And they're a volunteer company. So it's challenging. So we're asking hey, we need to proliferate, we need to grow, we need to do all these things. Well, if I have 50 people come in and say, I want to join the Allenton Fire Department, holy smokes, that's a big nut that you gotta fork out. So there's challenges every single direction you turn.
Any other questions before we move on? Thank you both.
Okay.
I'll now invite our, yes, sir. Supervisor Gallantz, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad you, Mr. Seeger, made mention of the SMART goals for efficiency, because presumably the economies of scale that could come out of this, purchasing power for
Extraordinary.
equipment, potentially even intergovernmental better note loans, all those type of things presumably are on the table. So to Executive Showman's comment about putting some teeth into these agreements, I think that's where, this committee and the board should be considering some of that. Is if we're going to be doing all this and have this extra levy up on top of the original or the initial levies, there's a commitment to that, right? The existing staff and chiefs and everyone down the line for the next 8 or 10 years or however long. So there's true buy-in. So it sounds like there's buy-in today, but will there be buy-in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now? So having those SMART goals and us holding ourselves accountable that they have been met. And oh, by the way, if they haven't been met, guess what? Maybe there's a year where there's not funding. And I'm throwing out that's an extreme, but maybe that has to be the carrot and the stick. I'm not sure.
That's exactly right. And it's what we've talked about insofar as, if we're not meeting them, I mean, practically speaking, as Supervisor Bossert said, once you start this, there's likely not a cut. I have a hard time seeing county board supervisors saying, yep, we're going to cut funding to EMS now. What I could see is the big problem is the increases and saying, hey, we're freezing until everybody's working together. That's teeth. That's meaningful. So I think the way to do it is similar to what we've done with shared services. We create a dashboard. It's public. It's on our website. You can see it. The committee approves the KPIs. We know exactly, here's the data points we're going for. Are we getting there or are we not? And every year we're coming back, certainly more than that, and trying to see, are we living up to these? And if not, maybe there's a reason. Maybe we got so far along and said, actually, this one's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay too. But the problem I think we've had for a long time, and I think there's plenty of chief electeds in here and maybe fire chiefs too, who would say just the act of the county and 13 fire chiefs and 20 chief electeds in a room and nobody died. That's an accomplishment. Yet. So I think to prove that point down the long haul, if we're able to come together and say, hey, this is really working well, or maybe even better, this one is just not. I think that measurement long-term is seriously important.
If I may, so from my standpoint, it's an absolute necessity doing this. Otherwise, we're failing our constituents. Net new growth is limited to what, maybe 2 municipalities as of late, Jackson and maybe one other little small one. Kewaskum. But the point is, it's not overcoming the 5 to 10% inflationary costs for healthcare and wages and equipment and everything that's been talked about. So if a part of our job is helping inform our constituents that without this, guess what? You can go up north to some counties where you're waiting 45 to 60 minutes for a call. If that's what you want, then tell your supervisors you'd like to wait 60 minutes for a call. I personally don't want to wait 60 minutes for a call. So I don't have a problem paying $50 or $75 extra a year. That's it. If you can't find $75 a year, I can help you find $75 a year. Guarantee you, whatever your income is, I can help you find $75 a year.
Starbucks.
So, that said, I.
Mr. Chairman, if-
The question
go
though
ahead.
is how do we come up even with that 350? Because Mr. Seeger showed a slide before that even with this recommendation, we still have a gap of status quo, all the costs that I just referenced, we're still going to have a gap. So again, that's a narrative to let folks know is to truly cover all those expenses, we are all bearing some of that. Each municipality is going to have to bridge that gap some other way. So they're going to have to make tough decisions.
That's a great transition point because I think what you need to hear from fire chiefs is the conversation, especially in the last 7 months, that has transformed from a little bit of bickering amongst all of us to them talking about how can we regionally work together to leverage our resources amongst one another. And the chiefs are doing it on their own. It's no credit to myself or to the chief electeds. They are really leading the charge in trying to figure out exactly the answer to the question you're asking. The other thing I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I had a state legislator call me and we had a nice long discussion and asked, well, really, wouldn't the better solution be for the county just to have your own EMS department? And there are counties in the state that do. It's not novel idea. If you go across the country, that's very normal. I am very opposed to us having our own county EMS department fully staffed for a couple of reasons. One, we have a system that works. It's just the long haul. If we don't do something, it's going to break. So don't break it if you don't have to break it, in my opinion. Second, I mean, you want to see expenses go up, create another higher level of government, new department, and watch what happens, right? Like, to me, that is just a non-acceptable approach. Could it save money initially? Sure. But you have all been on county board long enough to know saving money by going to a bit higher level of government almost never happens. So I appreciate those who have brought that up. It just isn't a realistic solution.
Thank you. I agree. That's a good transition into our next guest speakers that we have today. I'd like to invite Brian Heckendorf, the village president from Jackson. Has a few words he'd like to say.
Well, thank you for allowing us to speak today. And we've been involved, the group that's going to speak has been involved since the inception, and it's hard to believe it's been as many years as it has. So with that, good afternoon. My name is Brian Heckendorf. I'm the village president of the Village of Jackson, a lifelong Jackson resident and recently retired paid-on-call firefighter EMT, having served the Jackson area residents for 26 years. I think we can all agree that I have seen many changes in Jackson and Washington County in my 50 years living here. And many of those changes include higher demands put on our fire and EMS personnel. For generations, Washington County has benefited from dedicated volunteer and paid-on-call firefighters and emergency medical responders like I was. These individuals leave their families, jobs, and daily responsibilities to answer calls at all hours of the day. These people are invaluable to the residents of Washington County and beyond. But dedication alone cannot solve the staffing challenges that now face fire and EMS. The number of available volunteers is shrinking while the number and complexity of calls continue to grow. Fewer people work in the communities where they live, and it has become increasingly difficult for many residents to commit to the training and availability required of today's fire and EMS professionals. Unfortunately, people no longer work in the community where they live as they did in years past. And if they do, it's getting harder and harder for them to leave work to respond for emergency calls during their workday. That does not mean the volunteer model has failed. It means that we must build a system that supports our volunteers and uses their time and skills effectively. The countywide proposal would strengthen local providers by creating a more dependable network around them. Better coordination will help departments share resources, cover simultaneous calls, and dispatch the closest appropriate help when local personnel are already committed elsewhere. Local firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics would remain essential to the system. Local departments would continue serving the communities they know. The patches on their uniforms won't change. The lettering on the trucks won't change, as well as the ambulances. The difference is they would no longer be expected to meet a countywide challenge largely on their own. Supporting this proposal is one of the best ways we can support the people currently doing this work. It gives them a stronger foundation and helps ensure future generations are not asked to sustain an increasingly demanding system with fewer resources. With that, I would respectfully ask that this committee and eventually the county board would support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I'd like to invite Town Chair Bob Biggin to speak.
I'd also like to thank the committee for allowing us to speak today. As Chairman Newman said, my name is Bob Bingen. I'm the chairman for the town of Addison. I've been doing this for a little while. I remember a time when municipalities were allowed to increase property taxes in a responsible way to provide services. State-imposed levy limits changed that. Municipalities are now limited to increases based on new construction formulas, generally less than 1% increases per year. I'd ask anybody looking at their budgets how they would do it with less than 1% revenue increases per year. And this has been in place for nearly 20 years. The county proposal allows us to fund services such as fire and EMS and provide some relief for other expenses that we incur. I don't like tax increases either. The cost of doing nothing greatly exceeds the investment that we are asking of our taxpayers. This really isn't a question of if fire and EMS costs will increase in the future. They will. But they will increase exponentially if we don't put a coordinated effort forth to manage personnel and equipment needs, to support our volunteers, and to increase cooperation between departments and municipalities across the county. If we continue with a fragmented approach, individual communities will face increasing pressure to borrow money, hold separate referenda, duplicate equipment and staffing, or reduce services. The countywide proposal provides a more responsible alternative. It builds on the personnel, departments, and equipment already in place. It allows communities to share costs, coordinate resources, and reduce the inefficiencies created when every provider must do it independently. This is a conservative approach because it addresses a known problem before it becomes a crisis. It focuses on one of local government's most fundamental responsibilities, making sure qualified help is available when someone faces a fire, medical emergency, or other threat to public safety. No one should take a tax increase lightly, but residents should also understand that doing nothing carries costs and risks of its own. This proposal gives taxpayers something tangible in return: stronger local providers, more dependable coverage, and a sustainable system designed around the needs of the entire county. I respectfully ask the board to support the proposal as the most practical and fiscally responsible path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we invite our fire chiefs to the podium, does anybody have any questions for the two elected leaders that spoke? Okay, then we'll move on to invite West Bend Fire Chief Les Noren to the podium.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Committee, County Executive. I appreciate the time to speak today on what really is a very important topic. And like what's been talked about already today, this isn't a topic unique to West Bend, Washington County, Wisconsin. It's a problem in the entire United States that literally every emergency services agency is struggling with today. As I said, my name is Les Noren. I have the pleasure to serve as the fire chief of the City of West Bend Fire Rescue Department, and also as the president of the Washington County Fire Chiefs Association. Washington County's fire and EMS systems are increasingly being asked to do more each year with financial tools that were not designed to keep pace with the cost of delivering emergency services. Call volumes are increasing, personnel, equipment, training, operating costs continue to rise, volunteer availability is declining, while public expectations for timely, professional emergency response appropriately remain very high. These pressures are further complicated, as we talked about, by the Wisconsin property levy, tax levy limit rules, which generally tie municipal revenue growth to net new construction. a measure which has little, if any, relationship to the actual cost of providing fire and emergency services. For most communities, ordinary budget growth is no longer sufficient to sustain the level of services residents expect. The question before us is not whether these challenges exist or whether addressing them will require additional resources. We already know the answer to that, and it's a resounding yes. The question is whether we respond through a coordinated and sustainable countywide approach or continue managing the problem community by community until individual systems reach crisis and fail. Continuing on the current path will likely result in separate tax increases, referenda, borrowing decisions, service reductions, emergency measures as individual communities reach their financial or operational breaking point. That approach may preserve the appearance of local independence, but it does not necessarily create the most efficient, equitable, or sustainable EMS system for the area. A better direction is to think about EMS more collaboratively, financially supported and coordinated at the county level while continuing to be delivered locally through the providers that are already providing what we've already discussed as excellent EMS services. A countywide approach creates an opportunity to strengthen existing providers, better coordinate resources, reduce unnecessary duplication, and distribute costs more fairly across the population that depends on the system. It also gives local governments the ability to plan proactively rather than react after individual systems begin to fail. The countywide concept provides a strong foundation, but not all the details of the proposal have been finalized, as we've discussed. Several important issues, including the funding structure, accountability provisions, service expectations, and respective roles of municipalities and providers, still require careful consideration and discussion. The funding structure is especially important. It must be understandable, predictable, equitable, and connected to the actual cost of maintaining reliable EMS service and response. It is also imperative that these new funds be directed to EMS and used to strengthen the personnel, equipment, training, and operational readiness required to deliver that service. Communities must understand what they will contribute, what level of service they should expect, and how the funding will support the providers responsible for delivering that service. The final agreements must also protect accountability, respect existing service relationships, and provide stability for both municipalities and providers. Public expectations are equally important. Ultimately, the public, through you elected representatives, determine the level of fire and EMS services the community will provide. That decision is almost entirely yours. Most residents reasonably expect when they call 911, trained personnel and appropriate equipment will be available. Meeting that expectation requires personnel, vehicles, equipment, training, and continuous operational readiness. The level of service we promise must therefore be matched by a sustainable financial commitment and an honest public discussion about what that service costs. Fiscal responsibility does not mean avoiding every new expenditure. It means confronting known challenges before they become more costly, evaluating the full financial and operational consequences of our options, and choosing the approach that provides the greatest long-term value while minimizing unnecessary duplication and disruption. I believe the countywide concept can be a major step in the right direction. There is no single solution to the financial, workforce, and operational challenges facing EMS. Successfully navigate them will require continued collaboration, additional policy and operational changes, and a willingness to consider how services are organized, coordinated, and supported. This proposal can provide a framework for that to work. It can strengthen the local departments already servicing the communities and establish a foundation for additional decisions and investments necessary to maintain and improve EMS throughout Washington County. There may never be an easy time to make this decision, but acting before the system reaches a crisis gives Washington County more options, greater control, and a better opportunity to align public expectations with a service model taxpayers can sustain. I respectfully encourage the committee to support the countywide concept and continue the work necessary to develop a fair, transparent, accountable, and sustainable funding structure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief Noren. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Chief Noren? Thanks again, Chief. Next, I'll invite the Hartford Fire Chief, Tony Burgard.
Good evening, everyone. Tony Burgard, Fire Chief for Hartford Fire and Rescue. Been in the fire and EMS service in Washington County now for almost 19 years and counting. So what happened about 3 years ago when we started this proposal, and we had the discussions of we're not at the breaking point yet, but we know we're going to need help. We've come to this point along with the county executive's assistance, with Dave's assistance, with all of the meetings where we had 70+ people in a room and everybody walked out just fine. With your assistance, what are we asking for? Let's continue moving this forward. There's very little that could be done in the way of funding to assist what we all need for the growing needs of EMS and the cost of operating in the EMS world. The state statute that's available is utilized in other parts of the state of Wisconsin. This is an excellent opportunity to utilize something that is there and should not be taken lightly. Any additional dollar that a taxpayer needs to pay out of their pocket is another dollar that they don't have available somewhere else. But done in the method that's put out here can be done with respect to those taxpayers, knowing that at any given moment, any of them may need our assistance. So providing that assistance back to us with funding to make sure that we can continue doing what we are doing is very important. What else is there? What else can we do out there to fund? There has been a position statement that was put out by the Mid-Moraine Municipality Group that referenced something from the Wisconsin League of Municipalities. There was an alternate bill that referenced an addendum, an alternate that had been put out and has been misstated slightly. So that position statement was not in favor of that bill, the addendum. That addendum originally had some wording in it that allowed it to be outside of a county structure, to be levied in a slightly different way. But it got so clogged down with other negative political items that the League of Municipalities and the Mid-Moraine Municipality Group decided to not back it and to say that they were against it. Two separate items. They're not against the current state statute that's out there. They're not against the way that we are referenced directly in Washington County as approaching this funding method. They're against that alternate bill that is put out there. So I encourage you, 3 years later, please strongly consider this opportunity that's on the table. Let's work through this together and make those dollars available to assure that every 911 call is answered in a timely method. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Does anybody have any questions or comments for the Chief?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I ask a question? So during our work group, you'll remember, and those of you who were on the work group would remember, there was several conversations that revolved around what we've seen in other places, specifically complete privatization of EMS services and entire consolidation of departments. I'm not sure if one of the chiefs that spoke or maybe somebody else would be willing to speak to that, but you may recall that some of those discussions as well. I think it was really informative information to help get us to the point we're at today. And I think it would be helpful to the committee to understand why that's neither one of those things is being proposed or discussed.
I could probably sum it up in one word: cost.
Yeah, I mean, you were in all the meetings. You could speak to it just as much as anybody else, but consolidation and privatization both were talked about. So I think it's important to touch on.
Thank you, Chief Noren.
I can offer a few thoughts there. And I want to kind of piggyback on something the county executive said about standing up an entirely separate service to run EMS separate from the fire department. I make the point all the time that in my fire department, I have a minimum staffing on any given day of 15 firefighters. And if you take the ambulances out of my building and I don't do any EMS any longer, I still need 15 firefighters. It doesn't reduce the cost for the city of West Bend $1. What it does is creates a lack of sharing of services, because fire-based EMS in itself is one of the earliest adopters of shared services. You take two critical essential services that both have by virtue a excessive amount of downtime because they need to be ready for the next emergency, and you try to use that downtime for other functions. And as such, it provides a relatively efficient model as it is. The other importance of about a public sector model, in my opinion, is that it's dedicated to serving our public community. Often a private organization obviously has a board, and their operational priorities are different. It's in the name, right? They're a for-profit company most of the time, and their whole strategy is going to revolve around maximizing revenue and keeping the wheels moving and not being available for calls. I think that there's room for both in this community. I think there's plenty of non-emergency business for those folks to do. But I think that the core function of being ready 24/7 to respond at a moment's notice to emergency is best served by a public function that's accountable directly through the elected officials to the taxpayers.
I think you kind of hit it on the head there with my first comment about the cost. I mean, privatizing this type of service is exactly that. It's a for-profit business. Local control and local services does this for the cost of doing business. It's not for profit. So that when that proposal and those ideas were brought to the work group, it really wasn't a feasible option. I mean, the costs we have now, we think are high. Those costs skyrocket. So Supervisor
I
Prymer.
just want to make one statement on that is sometimes people won't, well, if it is privatized, they would just, like, do I really need this? Because sometimes we're too quick to go to ER, we're too quick to go to a doctor, when sometimes we just need to stay in bed for a day. But anyways, I just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you. Did you have anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it was important to touch on both of those. There was a fair amount of discussion about true consolidation of departments too, and we kind of veered away from that as well for similar reasons. In Western Waukesha County is a good example. They did a lot of consolidating, which initially saved money, and now they're finding themselves in a very similar conversation to the one you're engaged in right now, because their ongoing operating costs are rising higher and higher and higher. So neither is a silver bullet, and they are both cost related. But I think it's really important here in Washington County to acknowledge the really good work that these 13 departments and 20 municipalities have also done. And I think in that work group in particular, the folks who are on it, I think articulated it best. I could point to a number of different examples because we have 13 awesome departments, but the two that stick out in my mind is the city of West Bend and the village of Kewaskum. They had the opportunity. They've dealt with this already on a smaller scale, where there was discussions about consolidating and privatizing, and they decided to do what you guys have decided to do a bunch of times, whether it was public health or shared IT services or whatever. They decided to share services and cooperate and collaborate with each other, and they saved money doing it. The other example is Slinger, and they're different than all the other 12 departments we have, but they do make the private side work because they collaborate with Lifestar to make it work, to make it less cost effective, or more cost effective, excuse me. So there's different ways of getting there. What we found in our conversations was there is no one size fits all, and cost is a major driving factor. I wanted to make sure you knew, like, those things were talked about in the work group, and there was a specific reason why that's not the proposal you're seeing in front of you. The other thing I'd like to mention, and this isn't for today if you don't have the time or interest, but I would highly encourage you to look at the presentation in your packet from a couple years back from the Washington County Fire Chiefs Association. Chief Berghardt looked much younger the last time he was up here, but he gave a very nice presentation that's in your packet, and you'll notice as you go to the bottom of that, a number of the recommendations. We didn't talk about this as the work group, but when you read through the packet, you kind of look back to some of the things that they were saying, hey, you might want to consider this, you might want to consider this. They're built right into the proposal that's in front of you. So it just goes to show that it kind of came full circle through the meandering path of privatization and consolidation and all these different scenarios, including doing fire districts and things like that, back to, you know what, this county EMS levy is the best solution. So I appreciate the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have one more guest we'd like to ask to step up here, Germantown Battalion Chief Riker Holmes.
Good evening, committee, supervisors, county executive. Thank you all for taking up this important issue and listening and hearing what we have to say on this, and for the opportunity to provide comment and share some feedback that I've heard from local discussions and over the course of the last 3 years and more so the last 6 months. I apologize, I'm not nearly as good of a speaker as Chief Burgard was up here. He did an amazing job, and the summaries that we've heard tonight also did an amazing job. I'll quickly summarize my thoughts. EMS has been long viewed through one perspective, that is of a single local municipality. The EMS service can no longer afford to be viewed through that single lens. Every department in Washington County relies on one another for mutual aid, specialized resources, and support during high call volume times. The stability of a neighboring department directly affects the ability of the home department to provide service to their residents. All county residents benefit from this type of collaboration and partnership through increased access to services. The challenges that EMS is facing, as many have mentioned tonight, are not unique to Washington County. They're not unique to anywhere in the United States. Throughout the county, departments are experiencing increased call volume, higher personnel and equipment costs, challenges recruiting and retaining volunteers and qualified staff, and growing financial pressures on municipal budgets. These challenges will not become any easier if every community tries to handle them on their own. As currently designed, the countywide EMS program provides an opportunity to create a more coordinated and sustainable approach to EMS. This would be achieved through strengthening funding mechanisms, bolstering support for volunteer departments, organizing coordinated discussions on medical direction, protocols, and training opportunities. And ultimately, the program is to help ensure that all Washington County residents have access to EMS services. Just last week, the Germantown Village Board supported the continued development and discussion of the countywide EMS program. However, you may have heard there are still outstanding questions and concerns. Some of those concerns regard funding calculations, representative governance, accountability, and long-term financial impacts of such a program. Recently, some of the concerns have happened in other projects that referencing Public Safety Officer Sager referenced the dispatch transition. Also, Germantown, specifically the 2024 public safety referendum, in which we imported significant levy into the fire department, along with the proposed timeline that the board had to review the data. However, these questions and concerns are not a reason to discontinue discussions. Rather, they provide a lens that contributes to the project's current status and to its future developments. Continued participation and discussion gives the opportunity for everyone to further understand the proposal, building buy-in from all levels. Lastly, the countywide EMS program will not eliminate every EMS-related challenge. We've heard that several times tonight. But it does place our communities in a significantly stronger position to address them together. For those reasons and more, I respectfully request that the committee supports the continued development and progress of the countywide EMS program to work collaboratively toward a system that protects taxpayers, that strengthens local departments, and provides fiscally responsible and sustainable emergency medical services to all of Washington County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. Supervisor Gelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some food for thought as I sit here and listen throughout this whole thing. All the fire chiefs gathered together. You guys have been working together for years. You're all mutual aid. If somebody needs you, you're there. just this past week, I believe, West Bend's gotten assistance from Trenton and Newburgh and all that. It's amazing. You've been working together. I think it's time that we finally bring all of that together under one roof and really work together in communication, in our ability to solve our problems, instead of being just a bunch of individual departments who come to one another's aid. Let's make it all one system that works together. So I really support this plan. It does maintain the community individuality. I'm well aware. I go to Boltonville rain days and I see what a great job those guys do raising that money and the community pride they have in being volunteers. And I love that. And I want to see that continue. So I want to see your individuality continue to shine through. But let's all get together under efficiency and really working together so we can do it the right way. I believe this plan is the beginning of that system. And I look forward to having it come forth to the committee, through the committee and to the county board. And I hope we can really get this to a feasible, workable plan. Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. So I want to thank everybody that's in this room. There's a very large group of individuals in this room that have put countless hours into this over the last few years. I'm very proud to have been part of that process. I'm proud that we've gotten to this point, that we have this proposal in front of us today. I think it's a great opportunity that we have in front of us to create a partnership, not only to help our residents of our county, but to help our municipalities with a funding opportunity that they don't have the option for. So I look forward to many more productive discussions over the next few months. And I hope that we can all come together and agree upon on this moving forward. So did you have any last words?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The couple of questions that I think are also important for the committee to hear, and if you're willing to entertain any of the audience members from that work group, I'd be interested to hear them explain if the county chooses not to fund the current $1 million we've currently been funding for the last 3 years. What does that mean to an individual department or to an individual municipality, I should say? And then likewise, if this proposal or a meaningful version somewhere between that 1 million and 3.5 is not approved, what does that mean? If somebody's willing to try and tackle that question.
I guess
Those questions, I guess there's two questions.
I certainly would be willing to entertain the discussion if someone's willing to come up and speak to that.
Well, just in very, very quick numbers, the town of Addison received, of that $1 million, received $36,000 for the last 3 years. As of right now, we have paid out $29,000 of that 36 in increased expenses. We've got a 3% increase next year. We've got a 5-year contract with both of our departments, which again, both of our departments at 3% increase. That's very reasonable considering what the cost of fire protection and EMS equipment and personnel is. So if that $1 million comes again next year, that will help us fund the full amount of our increases for 1 more year. After that point, the $1 million doesn't cover it anymore. It's just that simple. So if we don't include at the very minimum, if we don't continue the $1 million of funding, every one of these municipalities is going to have a very big funding hole. That's on top of all the other funding holes that we've got based on the fact that we cannot raise our levies because we have other things to do. We have people that we employ also. We have roads that we plow. We have roads that we fix. I think right now we're on about the 67-year replacement plan on roads. That's a little town joke, but that's about what it comes down to. We try to be as efficient as possible in every way that we can be, but there is a shortage of funds. So I hope that answered the question.
I think it's important to note too, the $1 million funding that we had the last few years was not benefiting every municipality in the county. This new proposal does that and at a higher dollar amount as well. So Chairman Slate had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like you, I've been at a lot of these meetings the last 3 years. I remember fondly when Tony Burghardt led all the fire chiefs in here. I think it was in February of 2023. We've come a long ways. And the work done by the work groups, by the fire chiefs and the elected officials over the last few years is amazing. It's also amazing they didn't kill each other the first couple of meetings, like Josh said. Their work has largely been done. Now it's time for this committee and the county board to pitch in and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. I'll ask for any last comments from anyone.
Might I share a timeline of what the next few months look like? Would that be helpful?
Yes, sure.
I know there's been a lot of, well, Facebook chatter about what's all happening and how this is happening so fast. As you've just heard, this has been about 3 years of discussion. I know it's brand new for a lot of the community and for some of you. And we want to make sure you have time as well to digest and have public policy discussion, deliberation. So this meeting is the first of that. The county board on August 12th is going to get the same presentation that we shared with you today. And hopefully between now and then, a lot of folks here have time to think about other questions, and you hear from constituents on other concerns that they might have that you can bring to that meeting. And it's discussion only at that point in time. The next meeting that you have regularly scheduled in the month of August, I believe it's the 19th, if I'm not mistaken. That meeting, you can consider a resolution if you choose, or you can use a resolution as a starting point to modify for the following meeting in the month of September. That totally is your choice. If you feel like you need one more month, that's great. To Supervisor Bossert's point earlier, after that public safety meeting, about a week after that, I am hosting listening sessions, my quarterly listening sessions that we are going to exclusively talk about this issue. We're going to turn them into more of an open house format where there will be a lot of the graphs and charts from the PowerPoint that you saw, a lot of opportunity for community feedback and input in written form. And I'm inclined to bring that back to you in the month of September for you then to take that resolution with that feedback and turn it into a final product that you can then recommend up to the county board for the month of October. That timeline is super important. You're certainly at the chairman of the county board's discretion. The county board could take it back up in September as well. But it's important that the county board has a decision that they're able to make a recommendation from your body in the month of October, because in the month of November, that's the budget month, right? You have to make a final decision in October so that in November we can provide to you the budget accommodations that need to be made. And maybe for those behind me, as importantly, they have budgets that will depend upon whatever your decision is. That timeline is very important to stick to for all of those reasons. But as illustrated in the expansive description, it's about 3.5 months to provide for your deliberation, the county board's deliberation, and the community's impact, input and feedback, which we feel like is really important. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any additional questions if you or the committee have them.
Supervisor Bossert?
Comment to the committee. I think it would be foolish to take action in August before the public listening sessions. So I would encourage everybody that come August, we kind of view it as let's wait, let's attend some of those listening sessions, hear the public's view on this. And then in September, I think we can make the most informed decision.
I like that idea.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
If that's
Think-
the case, Mr. Chairman, there are two recommendations at the end of your committee report, recommended motions. We talked a fair amount today about SMART goals. We also talked a little bit about a resolution. I think it would be helpful for your conversation in August to have a draft of both of those. And I think it would be helpful for staff if you would give direction through the form of a motion to both the Chief Public Safety Officer and the Chief Innovation Officer, to start drafting that material so that when you come to the next meeting, you at least have a starting point, and then that can be modified accordingly as you determine fit.
Okay, so are you looking for a recommendation or?
I would like, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for a motion, both of those motions as listed in the committee report, in the recommendation section of the committee report.
No. Where are they?
They're I'm not sure what page number, but
I think page 5.
it's the end of the very tail end of the committee report.
Yeah,
They're
bottom
really
of
just
page 5.
one directs, essentially it directs staff to draft a resolution. The other one directs us to give you a draft of SMART goals for the next meeting. So we're not here talking in theory and hyperbole and rhetoric. We're actually talking about a starting point of a resolution for you to think through. And the same with goals.
I think I would make the point, I'm gonna support those motions, because in order to vote on a final product, we need to get more information on what that final product is. This is not binding us to doing this. This is giving us the information we need so we can make an educated decision.
I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for all the information. It gives us a lot to digest and continue to learn and move the process forward. Next item on the agenda is a request for strategic priority funding to support communication of the Washington County-wide EMS system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a request from the County Executive's Office. It's been referenced several times tonight that we really want to get community feedback. And the only way the community can provide feedback is if they know they have a chance to provide feedback. So what we're requesting here is a use of some strategic priority dollars to be able to fund the communication out to the community, things such as digital ads, so that they're seeing it on these hunky devices that we carry around, and other types of communication pieces that they know that those listening sessions are happening in August, and they can provide input and feedback there, and certainly online as well. Anything? Just want to add a few. Just want to add a few things to that commentary for the general public that's watching. Why don't you come up here, Dave? Dave, come up here.
Just to add a few more things to that commentary from the executive and for the general public that's watching. Those town hall listening sessions are scheduled for August 24th in the town of Addison at 10 a.m., the town of Trenton at 3 p.m., the town of Jackson at 5 p.m., and then again on August 26th, the town of Barton at 10 a.m., and the town of West Bend, 5 p.m. Just want to make sure that that's publicly stated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Entertain a motion.
Second.
A motion made and second to approve. Any other discussion?
Where's this money coming from? The 30,000?
So we have a fund that you established in the 2026 budget, and we fund every single year. We call it strategic priorities, and it's allocated for things just like this. When things come up that we want to communicate or special projects that come up, you have a fund in the budget that's dedicated to allocate, and the committee is the decision-making authority. Every committee is able to make allocations such as this.
Any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But anyway, are we gonna vote on it? I'm sorry.
So there is a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion or comments? So I think it's an absolute necessity. A decision this big needs to be communicated and it's a necessity in my mind, so I will support it.
You thought you had questions before? Wait till this comes up.
Yeah.
So, any other discussions? Right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion. One opposed. Motion carries. Our next meeting date is August 19th, 2026 at 7 a.m. This meeting is adjourned 5:54 p.m.